Hi there, it's Nick from No Magnolia, and I'm doing another tutorial now on a recent project that we did featuring an iPad keyboard, which is thrilling. Might be useful when you're doing app explainer videos, which is what this was made for. We had to basically do a big screenshot of the app, and there were various things that needed to be typed in. So we developed this keyboard which takes any text string and then types it out using an iPad OS 9 or whatever it is keyboard, and is completely dynamic and customizable. So let's dive in. I'll just show you the video first. So this is the video without sound. You don't really need the sound for the full experience. And what we wanted to be able to do was do stuff like this. So typing in an email address and then tabbing down and typing in the password. And that seems sort of fairly simple, but actually it was fairly non-trivial to do. But we felt that actually working on this and working up a way of doing it dynamically would be far better in the long run, because there would be changes and stuff, and then we could just type in any text we wanted to. So how do we do it? Well, I've got an iPad here. On an iPad you've got four keyboards, four keyboard layouts. So you've got the lowercase, uppercase, numbers and symbols. And you'll probably notice that actually each one has different combinations of keys. So that's the undo button on the numbers one. It's the redo button on the symbols one. If you go back to lowercase and uppercase, these things change around, and also actually there are different layouts of, you know, the question mark, exclamation mark and stuff down there, and in some contexts password. In some contexts the spacebar changes size as well. So there's lots of different iPad keyboard layouts that are used. We are using four here, which I will show you. You've got the just basically done four screen grabs of the caps, the lowercase, so caps, lowercase, and on this one the spacebar is shortened because you've got the voice input button there, numbers, which doesn't have a voice input button, and symbols. So our challenge really, I guess, was to work out how to highlight each of these depending on what was being typed. So the first thing we did was to go in and create a layer. I'm going to have to hide a few of these things. First thing we did was to go and create a layer which I called one highlight. Now let me just take that off and take this off. So it's just a simple shape layer, and what I did was I kind of moved it around and moved it until it exactly fitted over each key. It won't exactly fit over that key because I'll come to that in a sec. And I just adjusted the rounding just to kind of to fit it. Now you'll notice that it fits over these bottom keys here, or some of them actually. It's hilarious, isn't it? That one there. So that's exactly suited to the size of the C key. So it turns out that the all the keys basically on a keyboard, a standard iPad keyboard, are different sizes. The ones on the top row are all one width. The ones on the second row are a slightly less width, slightly less wide, and the bottom ones alternate. Z and X are different widths by about 1 or 2 pixels. All this is kind of, it needn't concern you, except it does mean that when you're moving this thing around, which is what we decided to do, it means you have to resize it as well. So the first thing we did was to make notes about, we got this and we went through all of the keyboard layouts. We sized it for each one, and then we made a note of the size. So in this case this is going to be 158, I think, is on the top. There you go, 158, and the position for each letter. And I will just come back in a sec because I have a spreadsheet, sadly. Okay, so this is our just make this smaller. This is our spreadsheet that we created with all the dimensions of all the keys, all the buttons. Now I'll make this available as a download so you don't have to do it again. The main thing to note is that the keys don't necessarily correspond from one layout to the next. So what I did was I made 4 columns, lowercase, uppercase, numbers and symbols, and then I correlated which button was where in which layout, and the position X, Y, and the dimensions, the size X and Y, width and height. And where there isn't a button that precisely corresponds to, for example, the Z here, I've just put an NA. And then I've done a bit of spreadsheet mashing. I've just done this one, comma, that, because what I wanted to end up with was a big long JavaScript object, which is basically an array of data, which I could then feed into the position property and the size property for this highlighter layer. The highlighter layer really is the key to the whole thing. That's how most of it happens. Yeah, anyway, so I've got this list. So if, for example, the Q, lowercase or uppercase Q key, 1 or the square bracket, open square bracket thing, are at 93,186 in this screenshot we've got, and they are all 158 by 148 in size. Then I've just used the code formula in Excel to find the Unicode code for that, for lowercase q and uppercase q, and that will become the reason why I've done that will become apparent in a bit. And then I have mashed this together in sheet 2. So I've got my XY, I've just pasted this in, paste values, so I've got just the raw text and the Unicodes. And then I have mashed this together to form the Unicode of, and this is, I think this is sorted, yeah, this is a while since I did this, so bear with me. The Unicode 105, which is somewhere, oh yeah, it's up here, look, there's a whole load more. So Unicode 105, don't know what that is off the top of my head, is position 1395,186, and the size is 156 by 148. So it's something on the ASDF line, the second row, and it's the lower layout. So it's something lowercase, so it's like an A. It's probably, actually it's quite far along, so it looks like it's like the J key or something like that. From that, again, I've done a bit of kind of text manipulation here to get an array element, I guess, an object element for each of these things. What this means, the way we're going to do this is to examine the last letter that was typed in, or the current letter that's being typed in, and then we're going to feed that, look that up in this JavaScript object that we've got, and feed that back into the position and size properties. So we have basically we end up with 4 JavaScript objects per property, so 4 for position, 4 for size, and the 4 are because there's 1 each for the lower, uppercase, numbers and symbols layouts. I hope it's clear. I'm confusing myself, so if you're confused, I sympathise. Anyway, that's as maybe. What it looks like basically in terms of the expression is this. This is pretty horrible. I'll just expand this a little bit. So we've defined 4 JavaScript objects here, which are basically associative arrays, if you know what they are, and they mean that when we're looking up, if we have a value like 106, We're going to go through these each in turn. 106 refers to the Unicode value of the currently typed letter. So that could be an uppercase U, let's say. And so we'll find that out, and then we'll feed it into this, and we'll check each of these in turn to see where it is. Now, some of the characters that you can type on an iPad are available in more than one layout, like the question mark, for example, is available in lowercase. I think it's actually available in all four. Lowercase, uppercase, definitely, and I think numbers. So this will actually appear in all of them. So let's find one that is. So you've got 44. I don't know what that is, but that sounds to me like a some kind of a symbol. That's at 152148 on the number layout. 44 is also at 152148 in the lower case, and presumably it's on the uppercase as well. Oh no, it's not. This is sorted by value here, so the lowest ones are at the front, going up to 8990 at the end. So what we'll do is we'll get this single Unicode value, and then we'll check each of these ones in turn to see which one has it first. If none of them have it, then we ignore it, but I'll come to that. This will mean that basically if you have something which appears in several of the layouts, it will actually it will never be typed by any of these if it appears in the first one, for example. So 44 will always be typed by the lowercase layout rather than any of the other ones, because it'll stop when it finds it for the first time. All this code means is it defines these objects here. Then it casts the source text of this layer, which I'll come to, as an integer. And then if this variable v is in the lower size, this is the size thing, but exactly the same applies to the position property. If this variable v, which is the Unicode value of whatever's being typed, is in the lower associative array, then our size is this, basically, which is associated with that particular Unicode value. If it's not in any of them, so basically tries all four of them in turn. If it's in none of them, then it sets the size to some nonsense value, which we can come to. And there's also a catch block, which you don't have to have. Basically, if this throws an error, then you can run the catch block here. So that will catch the error, and then we just split that. That comes in as a text array, and then we split it to form an actual array, which the size value can read. Now, this, whatever is being typed at the moment, has resulted in a size of 0, because actually that means that it's in none of these objects here. And you can't have a negative size for a shape there, so it's actually just cast it to 0, 0. So let's go back in and find the position, and you'll see that this is very, very similar. This works in a very, very similar way. It finds the source text of this layer, which we're calling keycode, and defines a variable called p, which is going to be the position, and then I'll come back to that line. And then it tries to find the this value v in each of these four blocks, in each of these four arrays in turn. If it can't find it, it will put the position to -999, -999. So basically, that moves the thing off screen. And also, because the size at this point will be 0, you won't be able to see it. So space is one example of a character which is in none of these things, because actually we decided that it was easier to have a separate spacebar character, which again I'll come to. A bit of a catchphrase, and then we'll just split it as before and feed that into the position. So, what do we need to make this work? What we've actually done is, let's close that so we can see more of our timeline. What we've actually done is we've made this as simple as possible to change. So we've got our text, and we have a start and end offset. All we've done is we've done something extremely simple, a really basic opacity transition. So as this is typed, we set the smoothness to 0 so it doesn't kind of fade in. It will just appear. But as this is typed, then it will appear there. And you can move these around. These are just a start and end keyframe. And the whole idea is that if you want to type something different, then it will automatically update. And you can see that as you run this through, and it's reasonably fast to update, it will actually type in what's being typed. So this, you can see this little highlight block, which is just the one that I highlighted earlier, is moving from button to button, from key to key, as we're pressing things. The only there are several caveats with this. So when you type, the thing typically highlights for not very long, and then unhighlights. Our version doesn't do that because it's far harder to do, knowing when it's just been typed and then unhighlighting again on the next frame, which is not possible. So this is the master layer. And actually I've made this a guide layer, so Alt L and then Shift G will, in Windows anyway, will stop that being a guide layer. This then feeds through to current text 2, and that is what that does. It takes this comp layer index +1, so that's basically this layer, the layer immediately below it. So the index is the index number of the layer, which is in this case 1, in this case it would be 2. So this comp layer index +1 is a reference to the layer 2 in this case. And then we're taking the source text from that, and then we are taking the animator 1 selector range selector 1 offset, which is this property here. In this case it's 52%, and L is the length of that text in characters, and then we are scaling this. We're scaling as X, which is the offset, goes from 0 to 100% in this case. We want Z to scale between 0 and the length, and we're putting a math floor thing on that, so it's an integer. So basically it will be it won't ever give you a kind of floating point, a decimal value. And then we are taking the first X number of characters for that. So what this text layer is actually doing is it's changing depending on what this text layer is doing every frame. So it's actually, this is more useful because then we can actually examine it and find what letter we want to work with. So let me unhide some of these layers. There might be some that we need. We are then using this layer called keycode. Now, control, that's this layer. I like to use, I like to have everything linked to sliders, and so I can add extra layers and stuff. There is a better way of doing this actually, which I now tend to use, which I can show you in a different tutorial. But this layer is a control layer, so you can set what I call the start layer to any value, and then you can refer to layers beneath that. So if you added a layer up here, you can just set the start layer to 3 rather than 2, and it would update all your expressions to suit. It's not the best way to do it, and the best way to do it I'll cover at some other point. Yeah, anyways, it is a way to do it. It's better than hard coding everything in and going, you know, this particular index number or whatever. you can refer to a layer's name. So this comp layer control, for example, is a reference to the layer name, and that's also a good way of doing it, unless you change the name and it doesn't update, which sometimes it doesn't. Anyway, what we're doing here is we are getting start layer, which is true text layer, and we're getting a reference to that particular layer, and then the source text. Oh yeah, what we've actually done is we've made this current text layer obsolete or redundant, because we're then using the charcode at thing to just draw out one letter. Now I can't remember where I've put this. Oh, it's over here, and you probably can't see it. Oh no, you can. So this is the Unicode code of the last letter of this, which is N. So Unicode of N, lowercase n, is 110. Now we can go back to our highlight, because that then takes that number 110 and does what we've covered before. So it looks for it first in here, and it will find it in the lower. This is the size, but it'll find it in the lower array. So 110 will be 152148, which is exactly the value we've got here. Ta-da! The only other thing to do really is to there are a bunch of layers here which I just use mainly for debugging, and that they need not concern the likes of you, because they're sort of it works now. So you can have a look if you want, and kind of work out what's there to do what. The only other thing, there's a space highlight, which basically will highlight any time a space is typed. So again, it looks at the key code, and if that number is 32, which is the Unicode for a space, then the opacity in this case is 100, else it's 0. And so when we something, so there's a G and there's a space, and then that will be 100% opacity, and then immediately afterwards it will go back down to 0 to turn itself off. The only other thing we have to do is we have to hide and unhide the four keyboard layouts, depending on what's needed. So let's have a look at what we've done there. All we've done is added an expression to the opacity property, and we've used a layer called layout and used the source text for that. If it's lower, then it's opacity 0, because this is the symbols layout. There's upper 0, number 0, symbol 100, and if it's anything else, then we'll just set it to 0. So all we've done is we've got a text layer up here called layout, and that is set to, we've basically copied in the 4 arrays here from one of the position values. These don't change because they're the same positions for each keyboard layer. The position of each key is not going to change. So these can be just copied and pasted. In fact, it's probably best if they are. And again, we've done exactly the same thing. So we've kind of passed that as an integer, that key code, which at this last look was 110, and then if this number is in the first array, let's expand this, then we'll set this to lower, and if it's in the upper position, then upper, and num and sim. If anything else, then it's just in the lowercase 1. So we'll set this to lowercase, and you can see that is up here. I don't know if I can maximize this. There we go. So that's all lowercase basically. If we did something like that, which has got a crazy amount of different upper and lowercase. So this is lower, and that's the number layout. So we're using the number layout here. Then lower again, and we're on the lowercase thing, then number, then lower, number, lower, upper, blah blah blah. So it basically works, and in each case, these 4 layers down at the bottom are have very simple expression which just changes depending on which layer you're looking at. So the symbols one, you want 100% opacity if it's sim, and this one is the numbers one, so you want 100% opacity if it's num. And that's basically it. So it's fairly simple. It's fairly it looks complicated, but actually it's simple, and the good thing about it is that it's really simple to change. So obviously you can type slower if you want, so we can expose those keyframes. So if you wanted to type your name here, and you could make it really slow. So let's drag that out so it's kind of like 4 or 5 seconds or something, and you'll be able to see that it slides up. That's just a piece of animation. It's keyframes, and it really types it out slowly. I'll stop it sliding. So just move those slidey keyframes here and move that out. So slide up, and then your name here. There you go. And that's actually stopped before the end of the new thing, but it doesn't really matter. There is one little thing which you may have noticed, that there is a slight delay sometimes. So that's on an O, and this is a Y. I think that this is because of the way that the animator actually handles the opacity. It's fixed in here, so this is why the actual animator layer was a guide layer, and we're actually using current text too. So if we wanted this to be in an input box, for example, we would use that, because that actually gives you these things are both feeding off the same value here. So then there's basically no delay. This one up here, which is editable, can do what it wants, but actually now this is completely synced. Then it goes to the U there, and then an R. So this layer would be the one to use. So this is why we actually put in this text layer here. But that's basically it. So I'm going to make these available, all the bits of it, the After Effects project, and the spreadsheet and everything else available, so you can have a tinker about with it. And if you use it in any projects, do let me know. See you next time.